Chapter 1. Finding Amber, 1,000 Lies and a Single Truth. Once upon a time, there was a young princess whose parents were lost to an insidious enchantment, their minds trapped by an evil sorcerer, leaving them eternally flailing in their own nightmares. Unable to help and left to navigate her royal duties with no magic of her own, the princess learned the art of illusion. Tricks of mirrors and shadows that mimicked true power. Though her deceptions were crude, cobbled together from desperation and cunning, they proved remarkably effective on those too young or too inexperienced to see through her performance. Each new friend became a willing audience, each relationship a stage for her carefully crafted show. As the years passed, the princess discovered that her illusions, though born of necessity, served her increasingly well. Each performance grew more elaborate, each deception more refined, though never quite reaching true artistry. She began to believe in her own showmanship, forgetting that real magic ever existed at all. After all, why seek true power when tricks and mirrors had given her everything she needed? And so she continued, performance after performance, audience after audience, leaving each stage littered with the remnants of those who had served their purpose, props discarded once their usefulness had ended. If she noticed the trail of destruction in her wake, she paid it no mind. Her eyes were already fixed on the next performance, the next willing audience, the next stage to claim as her own. While you're here, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my tiny egg of a channel. Thank you so much. Welcome back, Nuggets. This mother clucker has some thoughts. Let's ruffle some feathers and get into the video. Welcome to the first chapter of Amberlynn's historical deep dive. We're starting right at the beginning, and as is customary on my channel, I will be starting with 2 videos that Amber released, both talking about her childhood. They were released in her first year of YouTube, which was 2013, and show some really interesting cycles of behavior. So in 2013, Amber was 23, and we know that she was in foster care until she was 18. And I think what is striking about these videos is that already we can see some very rudimentary lying that is provably false, some narrative shaping as she wants it to be seen, and definitely those manipulation tactics that she is still implementing today. So we will actually get to see the beginning of the girlfriend cycle that she has, how she uses people, how she creates a narrative in her life, and how a little kernel of truth that I do believe is there can be layered and layered and layered, full of deceit and manipulation and drama to be shaped into basically how she wants the world to see her. So I'm really excited to get into these. I'm really excited to do a historical deep dive on Amberlynn because I've got to tell you, 2025 Amberlynn is driving me nuts. She is full on, and at this stage in the game, in case anybody in the future is listening, hello, future nuggets, we've got exes coming out, we've got ex-best friends coming out, we've got people turning on her left, right, and center, and all the while, she's kind of keeping up this facade that, oh, she's grown, she's different than she used to be, she's a whole new person who's improved, and I think these videos are going to prove that that's just unfortunately not true. A whole 12 years down the track and Amberlynn is essentially the same person. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's see what she has to say for herself, shall we, Nuggets?
Hi everyone. I kind of wanted to talk about something different today. Well, today I figured maybe you can get to know me and why I am the way I am now. So this video is going to be about my childhood and what led me up to where I am now.
Okay, so first thing to point out, this is something that really drives me mad in Amberlynn's early videos, is this affect that she has to her voice. It's very meek and very kind of softly spoken, pathetic, which is kind of, I think, designed as a defense mechanism to prevent people from, attacking her, because she seems all sweet and nice, right? And I think when it comes to Amberlynn, essentially everything that she sets up in her life is all a defense mechanism. Everything is set up in a way to keep her surviving and to keep her from getting hurt, which, to be perfectly honest, up until this point has served her relatively well. But that cycle, it has to end. It's inevitable that it will end, because these coping mechanisms are either going to run her out of people that care or will help her, or eat herself into an early game over. The other thing that I find interesting, just before we continue on with the video, is that she says, maybe you can get to know me and why I am the way I am now, which, I mean, she's not wrong, but I actually found that it wasn't so much in the stories that she told or the words that she used, but actually between the beat moments where she kind of showed her true colors. So let's continue.
So, I was born December 27th, 1990 in Key West, Florida. I remember as a younger girl, I did have a very, very hard childhood. My parents were drug addicts. They abused each other, neglected each other, but...
So this is the kernel of truth that I believe about Amberlynn, mostly because we've had it confirmed by her mother, and unless she's convinced her mother to play along with this story, I don't know, it's in some universe possible, absolutely, but I do, at Amberlynn's core, believe two things about her. One is that her parents did have substance issues, and two, that she did spend time in foster care. And those two things, just on their own, if you ignore everything else about Amberlynn, those two things are really setting up a very poor start to life. And I, speaking from experience, not the same experience as Amberlynn's, but speaking from experience of having to learn how to survive as a child in an environment that was dealt, you have to teach yourself how to get along. And sometimes those lessons that you teach yourself are not the correct lessons or the correct way to deal with things. And I do have a certain amount of empathy for young Amberlynn having to do that. Where Amberlynn fails to take accountability, I know, are you shocked? Do you need a moment, Nuggets? Amberlynn doesn't take accountability. But where she doesn't take accountability is acknowledging that that's what she had to do in her past to survive, and that no longer serves her in an adult world, in the real world, having actual relationships. And instead, she kind of just takes the tact of leaving devastation in her wake. And I don't know, she seemingly doesn't care about it. I don't know if she does. Her actions would suggest she doesn't. So yeah, let's keep those kernels of truth in mind, and we'll see how she develops those as we go.
It's not just about the negative things in my life. I can remember the positives. We'd go camping.
So I found it really interesting that she raised camping as a positive experience, because just recently, as it happens in one of her vlogs, she speaks to Mama Lynn about this memory. And this is a snippet from a vlog that she did early February.
Probably, I've shared like, oh, we've gone camping and stuff, and everyone's like, oh, that means she had such a good childhood. It's like, no. Do you know what my parents were doing at camping?
In the tent, most of the time, arguing, trying to get high.
Yeah, and me and my brother were out doing our own thing, but still, like, I enjoyed it still slightly, because that was at least a break in our monotony.
Change of scenery, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a terrible parent, but
we don't have to talk about that.
I can't change that right now.
So I believe Mama Lynn in this clip, and I do commend her for really taking the effort to turn her life around. And I have no doubt that it was a long road and probably continues to be a long road. It probably doesn't help that Amberlynn keeps bringing this stuff up on camera with her, but I actually think that the accountability that Mama Lynn appears to take with Amber is amazing, and what an incredible role model for Amber to look at and say, oh, this is how you life, this is how you adult. And I've said this in previous videos, I know, but Mama Lynn would be an amazing starting point for Amber to look at and start practicing those behavioral patterns.
But as I got older, I started realizing more so that my parents weren't like normal parents. Their location of using drugs was in the bathroom. So every time I'd go in there, I knew that when they came out, they'd be a different person. It wasn't a good way to live, but I feel like it did make me stronger in a way.
So I think when deciphering Amberlynn's truths or lies, the most important thing to do is to pass it through a filter of what makes sense. And there's a lot of things that she says that, of course, don't make sense or are very, very rudimentary levels of deceit. But I think what we're seeing here in this little clip is the seeing them go into a bathroom so as not to do the substances in front of the children does make sense. And unless she's heard this from someone else, which is absolutely possible, I think that this has a kernel of truth to it. But you notice how she just can't help but martyr herself to add those levels of drama. People can say, yeah, my history has made me stronger, but Amberlynn instead is like, it wasn't a good way to live, but I feel like it did make me stronger. It's just very, I don't know, it feels very contrived to me. Both of these videos feel very contrived, just so you know.
I went through a lot. When I was 8 years old, my mom said that she was pregnant with her third child. I already had a brother, and he's younger, so I'm the older child, and I was really happy. I was thrilled, actually. I knew she was doing with him. Any 8-year-old wouldn't have a clue, but I had to grow up. I had to
And I think it is true that she was delighted to have a brother. I do. Whether or not it's true that Mama Lynn was doing substances through her pregnancy, we don't know. That hasn't been confirmed. But it does really set up that however much of this is true, even if you just take the core facts, this is a very objectively rough start to life that kind of sounds a little bit Candy-esque. If you haven't seen that, by the way, Candy Chapter 1, please go check it out. It's very interesting. And something as well that I wanted to note, because I've done these origin stories for both Candy and Eugenia at this point, their stories I feel like stood apart from Amberlynn's because, well, in Eugenia's case, it was kind of a flippant, story time thing where I don't really know if she knew what she was saying at the time, but it has an air of truth about it because it's kind of, it feels so off the cuff. Candy's, on the other hand, also rings quite true to me because of the rawness that she brought to it. Everything felt very sincere. Nothing felt like it had been pre-written, if that makes sense. Whereas my feeling that Amberlynn is bringing to the table, and I could be way off base, maybe this is just her not being comfortable in front of a camera, I don't know, maybe, but it all feels like a story. It feels like the beginning of my videos, where I'm telling a story. It's been written, and that's the vibe that she brings across. Nothing about Amberlynn, or very rarely does it come across as sincere.
So when my brother was born, he was so adorable, and gosh, I loved him. As days went on, I did kind of take the role of being a parent in a way. I still remember one time in particular when my parents were like passed out. My baby brother was crying, and his crib was by a curtain, and the curtain string was wrapped around his neck. His face was purple, he was screaming, crying, and to put it shortly, I had to save his life, and I did.
So I actually find this interesting in this video as well, because just recently in one of her vlogs, she talks about this specific event as well. Now, the camping thing and the curtain thing, those two stories, I've heard repeated a lot. And I think that kind of sets up a little bit of a red flag for me because, for example, if you sat me down and asked me to tell you about stories that stood out in my mind of my childhood, I would be able to rattle off. I would be able to sit here for hours and tell you. In fact, I'm writing a book on it, but I have so many that I could keep talking for hours. So I have many examples of why my childhood was bad and why my mother was a horrible mother. Either it's possible with Amber, because she was so in and out of foster homes and in and out of her parents' custody, maybe it's that she doesn't have that many memories, and maybe there wasn't enough time to develop those memories. It's possible. The way it kind of makes me feel, though, is, are these the only things that happened? I don't know. I mean, she could be blocking things out too, who knows? But my point being, I just find it interesting that the same stories come up all the time. I'd be interested to know if you're willing to share how that reflects with you with your childhood, because I know brains do cope with trauma in very different ways, but it's just something that stood out to me, so I thought it was worth mentioning.
Then I realized that I don't think my parents will ever change. I was a 9-year-old and I was taking on the role of being a mother.
So I thought this was interesting because in the previous clip that we listened to, she said that she almost had to take on being a parent in a way. But now in this clip, not long down the track, she's saying she is taking on the mother role at that age. And I've observed this with Amberlynn telling stories in previous videos that I've done as well, where she will come up with an idea at the beginning of a video, and then by the end of the video, it's just fact. So it was being questioned at the beginning, but then solid fact by the end. And I'm starting now to get into the territory where I think we're starting to layer drama and manipulation and narrative on top of that kernel of truth.
So one day when I was at school, I think 3rd or 4th grade, I got a call to the office. There were police there and I wasn't sure what was really happening, and come to find out, I was being put into foster care. I was being put into foster care with my one brother, but my little brother was being put into a separate home. After being in foster care for over a year, I was actually in a children's shelter for longer than that, I found out that my brother was actually going to be an adopted child. He was going to be put in closed adoption, which meant I would never be allowed to see him again. It broke my heart.
So I believe this from her. I do think this was probably very upsetting. Like, what a thing to be ripped out of everything that you're familiar with, your home, your entire world turned upside down. And on top of that, you find out that your brother is not going to be your brother anymore, and you may never see him again, because a closed adoption means that is his right when he grows up, that he does not have to reach out. So I think from an objective standpoint, when, you know, not taking into account the atrocities that Amberlynn has committed in her life, just this 8 or 9-year-old little Amberlynn, I think we can all feel bad for her situation and the cards that she's been dealt. And now in a system that we know is broken, I think it's pretty much broken in every country, and it wouldn't have been a great situation. And potentially what she didn't know is maybe the decision had been made by her parents that they were going to put the youngest up for adoption because it's easier to adopt out a baby. But we would never know outside of an interview with Mama Lynn.
In a way, I felt like my own child was being adopted.
Okay, I just left this in here. If you want to, I'm going to play that back again really slowly. She makes a very dramatic statement of, it feels like my own child is being adopted out, which we already know she's now talked herself into that was her role. But then she does this little look at the camera, and by the way, early Amberlynn, clucks herself so much more than Eugenia does. But she does this kind of hair flip and her whole demeanor shifts. And it's almost like she's getting ready to smile, which is contradictory to what she's discussing. And it makes me a little bit uncomfortable about what this narrative is. So, yes, I think it would have, without a doubt, been upsetting to have your family torn apart. But why do we need to add this extra level of drama to things?
I was thrown around into different foster homes and with my other brother, and soon we got separated. When I turned 12, my parents finally decided to get their act together, and we went to court and we had a 6-month trial to live with them. That trial turned into 2 years, but it was a failed trial. The whole time my family was just getting worse and worse. I started smoking marijuana. I turned to the wrong type of people to hang out with. My brother started acting out. He started hitting me.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. So we're already starting with substances that we know that she still struggles with today. And I only say struggles with because she says she wants to stop doing it, but then finds that she can't or won't, or whatever the situation is. Although I understand that there's no physiological addiction to marijuana, there is absolutely a psychological one, and we know that she struggles with psychological addictions. So in regards to, you know, acting out as a young teen, and it sounds like, you know, the brothers acting out, I think all of that makes complete sense. I think if you are a perfect teenager after that kind of experience, that would be the exception, not the rule.
My parents got worse. Their drug addiction went to a whole new level. We actually lived in a trailer. That's mainly what I lived. Whenever I lived with my parents, that's mainly where we lived.
I know people always say living in a trailer is a bad thing. Look, different lives are valid. Different lifestyles are valid. I'm assuming what she's indicating there is that they had some level of poverty within their home environment, which makes sense.
I never saw my dad, even though we were under the same roof. He had people coming in and out of the home all hours of the day, all hours of the night to buy his drugs. My parents actually got separated at this time, which was hard to handle. I guess it was best for them, but it was still hard.
Yeah, and of course that's going to be hard. I think a divorce or a separation, yeah, that's going to hit anybody hard, no matter how amicable it is, because children are craving that level of like comfort and familiarity. And then when something is presented as a massive change, of course that's going to be difficult to adjust to, especially if you don't have a support structure and the parents who are helping you through that process. So this will be compounding all of her issues at this point.
One day I was actually texting a friend and I told her that I wanted to die and I didn't want to be alive anymore. Her mom found the text message and her mom brought the text to my school and I ended up being put in a mental hospital. I didn't think I needed it. I wasn't really gonna kill myself. I was just really depressed and it was just, life was not going how I wanted it to.
So this is super telling about how Amber has learned young how to deal with things and how she continues to this day to really do a similar sort of thing. So if you notice the words she used right at the end there, just life was not going how I wanted it to. What we're seeing there is probably not the first stages of manipulation. This is probably like down the track after having learned fairly effective manipulation, having to survive in that kind of childhood. I know that I managed to master manipulative tactics around the age of 9 or 10. I was in full swing. So now we're looking at a teenage Amber who's using this. It's probably not early manipulation, but she's being faced with a problem where she's not happy with her life or her situation or whatever the case may be. And rather than seeking anything positive, she's learned to go for that heavy emotional manipulation. And to say something like that when you know that you didn't mean it, that is sending a really big message. And the fact that there was a consequence of being sent to a hospital, if you see what I mean by how willing she is to throw around such big words to get really big reactions rather than seeking a different way of doing it. And again, at this age, I so don't blame her for that. That's just her learning how to survive, how to work her environment and the people in it to her benefit. The reason that I bring it up and why I harp on it so much is because we really don't see any development past this kind of thinking in a 34-year-old Amberlynn.
I was in the mental hospital for about 6 days, and obviously they diagnosed me with depression, which I already knew. I was diagnosed with depression since the age of 10, and I was taking antidepressants for I don't even know how long. But after I left the mental hospital, I took a whole new meaning of life because I saw people in there that were mental. I'm not trying to be mean in any way, but I don't think I was meant to be there, but it did change my life.
I mean, this is really poorly worded on Amber's behalf, but I do understand what she's trying to say. She is being exposed to people who live a life or live in a state that is far worse than what she's experiencing. And maybe that was eye-opening to be able to see just how bad it could be. But at the same time, I'm wondering if she's spent time with these people and she gets to see that these people don't have to take responsibility for themselves because they're in a certain state for whatever reason. Is she learning at this time that if I do these series of behaviors, I will always be looked after, which is something that I felt was missing in my childhood and I desperately crave. I think that's completely understandable as a child who had their world so in such upheaval all the time. But I do hold some criticism, of course, for current day Amberlynn of never bothering to see if there was a different way of conducting herself that would yield more positive results in the long run. Undealt with trauma, clinging to coping mechanisms and manipulation tactics to get what she wants, well, that's just what she's trapped in, or trapped herself in.
Somewhere in my younger years, my mom did have another child, and I held him once, and she put him up for close adoption the day he was born. I miss them every day. Even if I knew one brother longer than the other one, I love them both equally. And more than anything, being able to see them again would mean the world to me.
I just want to note as well something that stands out to me, and I know this is Amber telling Amber's story, but everything she says is how it affects her, what it meant to her, how it made her feel, what she did, without like any sort of insight as to how other lives around her were complex as well, and how other people have needs and feelings and are sentient beings in that way. So obviously we're still seeing this. If you're familiar with Amberlynn content, you know she still does this today, like literally today, but it is coming at me in these videos, like in bold, underlined, exclamation mark, that this is all about Amber's experience.
So even though my parents were separated, my mom was living down the street with her boyfriend in a different trailer, which was literally 10 feet away. So I was in class yet again, and I get called to the office about school. I never went. Things that were happening at home were ruining my education because that's all I thought about. I'd either miss school or I'd just not care. Like, I'd go and I wouldn't do any of the work. School was hard. Every day I was bullied. I was the smelly kid. I was the fat girl. That's how people knew me. I was Fat Amber.
Okay, so I just want to highlight here that in this story, and granted, you know, she's new to YouTube, so she's probably not going to let everything hang out, but I do want to put into context here. She is describing herself as a victim. She is a victim of school, of friends, of the system. Everything is happening to her. I just wanted to play a clip from, actually a few clips from Mr. Snowflake's series of Every Amber Lie Ever, which I have a feeling that I will be referencing a lot in this series that I'm doing. So I'll link this down below. I always feel a bit silly because I'm such a tiny channel and he's such a big channel. It's like you've probably heard of him, but just in case you haven't heard of Mr. Snowflake, you need to know about Mr. Snowflake, so I'll link it. But this is what he found.
Amber has claimed that she was not a bully, she's never been a bully, but then she forgot that and then admitted to being a bully. The first bad thing that I remember doing was bullying a girl in 2nd grade. I broke her glasses. How did you bully people? Why did you do it? Sometimes I would say mean things to people online. Online, this was years ago, doesn't count. Sometimes I would bully younger people in school. Younger people? I think I did it because I was bullied. No, you weren't. I wanted to retaliate. It's sad. I would never do something like that now. I was 12 when I was a bully. I never bullied anyone since, so it was more so me being immature. That's not what you said. That was 11 years ago. All children become a little rude when given the chance. No one is perfect. When I turned 13, I changed automatically. She would later say that she changed at 17, but fine, whatever. When I turned 13, I changed automatically without having to think about it because I'm not a bully. I'm the victim! My whole life I have been bullied beyond belief. You'd be surprised. She also told us that she beat up a kid when she was 16, 17.
This girl gets her virginity taken from my brother, and then it was an hour later, she's literally having sex with my ex-boyfriend.
Oh my god.
So me and my friend said, tomorrow morning we're fucking her shit up. Okay, please keep in mind, I was 16. Like, I'm literally not 16 anymore. Like, that was years ago. 14 years ago. So we were very mean to her, physically. And we ended up, like, taking her shoes.
So, yeah, you see what I mean. And I don't necessarily think that Amberlynn, after that kind of upbringing, acting out aggressively is at all out of the question. It's not good, don't get me wrong, but I think it makes a lot of sense. But it is a really good example of how even very, very early on, 23-year-old Amberlynn is still spinning the narrative.
But as I was in class on one day, I got called to the office, the cops came, and yet again, me and my brother were being put into foster care. The biggest word you can use for such an experience is it's hard, it's overwhelming and depressing. You don't know what to do when you're put into strangers' homes. You don't know what to do when you're put into a children's shelter. You kind of just have to go with the flow. It's like you're caged in. It's just hard.
So a little bit of overdramatic there, but I can understand and I can see that if she's being bounced around foster homes and children's shelters and she's always being exposed to all of these different, microcultures within houses, you could understand how survival would require you to be able to fit into the situation and manipulate the people to see you in a certain way just to try and, keep everything as easy as it possibly can. Now, I am fully aware here, I have never been in a foster situation or in a children's shelter. My clucked up childhood did not involve that, fortunately. So if you have had experience and you're willing to share and you feel like anything that I'm saying here is off base, I am very open to being educated about this situation. But this is just me putting together what kind of makes sense to me from a behavioral perspective.
I was in the shelter for months and I had this daily visit with my mom where I was allowed to spend the whole day with her, with my brother as well, once a week. So we did that, and I was just texting my friend, simply joking, saying I should live with you, because she was my best friend at the time. And little did I know, 2 months later I was living with her It was absolutely insane. I don't know how it happened. It happened so quickly, and honestly, at the time, I thought this was beginning to a whole new life that I was gonna love every minute of. But I was definitely wrong.
Okay, so this is really important because this, remember what I said about we need to look at what makes sense? This doesn't make sense. As in, she sent a text saying, oh, we should live together, and then she doesn't know what happened. It all happened so fast, and then she was living with her. That doesn't make sense. So this might be the first example of Amberlynn manipulating the situation in order to live in a situation or with a person that she wants to live with for whatever reason. And I know that she did it with Casey, and we will be covering that. And I believe to my core that this is what she was trying to do with Tomalee, her most recent ex. I think she was trying to go there under the guise of being a holiday, and she was going to burrow in like a tick. And I think that the difference being Tomalee is a mature woman and, you know, with a family and a career, and you just can't pull the wool over somebody like that's eyes as easily. Whereas when you're dealing with teenagers, of course, that's going to be a lot easier to manipulate. So let's just keep this in mind because we're going to revisit this again. Oh, and by the way, this "and I was wrong" ending, this was the cliffhanger for the first video. So the next clip is going to be into the second video that she released, I think the next day.
I was alone, and feeling alone when so many people around you is one of the worst feelings in the world. And more than anything, I just wanted somebody, and that somebody turned out to be food again. I climbed my way up to being 420 pounds, and I will never forget that day when I weighed in and I was 420 pounds, and for some reason I feel like I even weighed more at one point. It was shocking.
I mean, geez, like at this point in 2025, we know that she's sitting around the 520, just under 520 kind of mark. So she had and she's been a lot bigger than that. So we know that she did just keep growing. Something that Amberlynn does that I'm pretty sure is happening is that she has this kind of driving need to lie about things or exaggerate things or make things look really unusual or quirky or whatever to make herself seem more interesting than she is or than she perceives herself to be. I think this is a really common thing. Teenagers will often embellish or completely make up stories that they've thought of or that they've heard somewhere and apply them to themselves just to be able to stand out, to mean a little bit more to the world than they perceive they already do. And this kind of thing usually people grow out of because as you develop into adulthood, you start to develop your own personality, your own identity. You realize that you have things innate within yourself that make you different and unique and nuanced as a fully formed person. But Amberlynn never grew out of this. She still does it, even with silly things like in one of her most recent vlogs she talked about having a always slightly lower than normal body temperature, and that's super weird. Like, what a thing to, why would you flex on that? It's so incidental, but she needs to make herself seem more interesting, better than all the time. And my point that this kind of rant that I was on is that statement that she made at the beginning of this clip of feeling alone while being surrounded with people is the worst feeling. And there's just something about that delivery that doesn't feel as authentic as some of the other things she's delivered. And I do wonder if we're seeing some embellishment or some taking of somebody else's story and applying it to her. She is right. I do agree with her. I just don't know that that was her original thought.
When I turned 18, I moved to Oklahoma to be with some of my family. And yet again, I thought that was going to be a new beginning for me, and it didn't work. And I wanted it to so bad. Things were happening, and I actually had my first anxiety attack there, which was horrible. And pretty soon, I was diagnosed with panic disorder, and it's just so much was happening. And
Okay, so I do believe that there is an element with Amberlynn of realizing that when she is mentally unwell or when she's experiencing mental health issues, whether it's the depression or the anxiety or the BPD, I don't know, but people will like flock to her to support her and to make her feel more comfortable. I think it makes complete sense that Amberlynn has anxiety and depression, but it's kind of been taken and applied as a personality and a way of coping that I think was probably learned around these teenage years of her life. And at this point, it makes sense why there is a panic attack, because she's 18 and she's been kicked out of the foster system. So now she's living with family, and probably what isn't being said is, well, Amberlynn, what are you going to do for work? What are you going to study? How are you going to, start moving on with your life as an adult? And everything that we have seen from Amberlynn up to this point is that she is going to seek the comfort and she's going to seek the need that she has to be looked after. And unfortunately, now these lessons are going to be taken into adulthood.
while I was in Oklahoma, I was in a long distance relationship, and I was gonna go visit my girlfriend, and not my current girlfriend, I'm just mentioning that. I was gonna go visit my girlfriend, and she lived in Arizona, so I went to go visit her. But while I was in Arizona, I was kicked out of Oklahoma. I got a text from my mom saying that my grandma did not want me living in her home, so I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. So I stayed in Arizona.
Okay, so she has not named who she's talking about, but this is speaking about Casey, and we will be calling him Casey and using he, his pronouns. I do not buy this in any way, shape, or form. Do you notice the demeanor difference when she's telling this story? And it's like, oh, it's so weird. I don't know how it happened, which is really similar to the first time that we discussed of it just happened and she was living with her friend. So I think that there is a real parallel, like I said, with Tomalee. I don't think what actually happened was that maybe the grandmother would have been happy to see her move out. I don't know if she did actually kick her out, but this was absolutely used as a way to force Casey's mother into letting her stay there, which is some real high-level manipulation, isn't it? To worm your way into somebody's life and then emotionally blackmail the people whose lives you're reeling into. It shows a complete disregard for anybody else's needs, wants, or thoughts, situations, and as we'll hear very shortly, it wasn't a great situation.
My girlfriend's mom did not want that at all. She hated me. So did her boyfriend. Several times he threatened to kill me. I was abused there a lot, in several different ways.
Okay, so keep in mind what she just said. Now, I have grabbed some clips from Casey's YouTube channel. I will link this video down below. It is actually a video on addressing the grape allegations, but this little clip that I pulled is just describing what happened and the living environment that they were in.
The time we were dating, when we started dating, I should say, I was 15 years old. 15 when we met. She's 2 years older than me. We were together from the time I was 15 to the time I was 18 years old. When I first met her in person, it was in California. We had a good time. Oh no, I was 16, sorry, because my birthday passed. But I met her online at 15. I met her in person at 16. Well, we only stayed a week in California. We had to go back. Well, it wasn't bad. Our relationship wasn't bad. We talked a little bit. It was pretty good. It was fine in the beginning. After meeting her for the first time in July in California, she was going to come down for a month because I was going to take her to an anime convention. Stay a month, whatever. She was supposed to go back. I never heard the conversation on the phone. But but this is one of the truths. One, her grandmother said she couldn't come back. I was 16 at the time. My mom was mad. We didn't have a lot of money. When she's talking about our small apartment, we didn't have a lot of money. We were poor. It didn't have a bedroom door. It was like a studio with like a wall, like breaking off the living room and bedroom. But we didn't have money. I didn't grow up with money. So that's all we could afford. So she had a 16-year-old to raise. Plus, she was just getting into my mom was just getting into a new relationship. And then all of a sudden, there's someone else that's there that she needs to make sure to feed. Yeah, it made her mad. But I fought for Amber to be there because she didn't have nowhere to go. Now, it was because of me that she stayed. My mom didn't want to. But what was wrong is her mom didn't really stand up to her own mother. But, it was whatever. I fought for her to stay. I didn't want her to be homeless. It was, I felt that was the right thing to do. I don't want to say I regretted it, but the things that happened afterwards, I kind of regretted our whole entire relationship. And I hate to say it, but I do regret our whole entire relationship. I do.
So I find Casey very credible. I think his story and the details that he makes sure to correct, like little things like what age and all of that, I think this is the truth. So if we pull ourselves out of, the Amber world and everything that surrounds her, and we think about this woman and her son living in a studio apartment, struggling to get by, maybe potentially inviting a stepfather figure into the household, which is a whole thing in and of itself. We've got a teenager and a single mother kind of scenario, struggling to make money anyway. And then we add Amberlynn to this scenario. I would have been furious if I was the mother too. And I don't know. Maybe the grandmother did kick her out. Maybe she didn't. It's kind of irrelevant because Amberlynn, even at 18, should not have been inserting herself into this situation with a minor. That is just wrong on so many levels. But you can see what I mean, right? The parallel with Tommy. So we have a very similar situation. We have a kind of a very lengthy holiday. And if you've watched my videos on, I think it was the Vlogmas videos when she got back, and I said at the time that I didn't think she was intending on going back to Oklahoma. I think she was hoping that would be an indefinite stay. So we're dealing with adults in today, but at this point, Casey was a teenager. So you see what I mean? Like, these manipulation tactics work really well on teenagers, but not so well on mature adults who have a fair whack of life experience behind them. But isn't it wild that we're looking at something from 12 years ago? She's exactly the same person. And she's sitting there at the moment releasing vlogs saying how much she's grown and how different she is. And she tries to distance herself from her past self. But there's been no growth at all that I can see.
I slowly started falling out of love with my current girlfriend and realizing that the person I should be with was right before my eyes and I didn't even realize it. The current girlfriend I have now, her name is Crystal, and she's changed my life.
Okay, so this is the girlfriend cycle that I was referencing earlier. This is just the first iteration of this. So she will have a girlfriend, she'll be talking to people behind the scenes, having the next one ready to go, and then pretty much be able to roll into that relationship and so on and so forth, and then it repeats. And I do think that this is just that childhood need that I was discussing earlier, of that she really needs, she craves that stability and to be cared for. And so when it starts to look like that isn't going to be there, she has another one ready to go, because mentally she cannot afford to let herself be in limbo because she's not built any skills. And I think at this stage, we're talking, she was 18 when she moved in with Casey, but I believe that was a 3-year relationship. So that takes her to 21, which means we're a ways into the Crystal relationship now. I think I've got my timeline right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a little hazy about the exact timeline of early Amberlynn, but I think that's what I've got.
One day in Arizona, I meet her online and we just talk and talk. She's funny, she's silly, and she she really lights up my world. While living in Arizona, I mean, Crystal would text all the time, and I mean, she didn't start lighting up my world right off the bat. We were just friends. She was just funny, and my attention became more towards her and not so much towards my current girlfriend, because how I was treated by her and by her family, it rubbed me wrong and it wasn't right.
So this makes me wonder, as an 18-year-old freshly out of the foster system, it is an easy tale to spin to somebody else's parent that says, I'm going to be homeless if you don't help me. I have never known any sort of stability. I am a foster child out of the foster system, and I have nobody else. So you can understand why somebody else's parent would go, I'm not happy about the situation, but I will support you. And then the next tale she spins to Crystal's parents is, I'm a child out of the foster system. Yes, I'm an adult, but for the last 3 years, I've been in a highly physically intense and emotionally intense relationship. And now I'm a broken person and I need help. So you could also understand why somebody like Crystal's parents would want to help that person. But you can see that those sorts of stories start to make less and less sense as you get older. And it kind of makes me wonder if that's why we're starting to see extra stories like mental health or physical health things, or even eating so much that you put yourself into a disability where it's undeniable that you need the help. So you're not able to sell the foster child story anymore, but you've got these new ones that have been concocted. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. I'm musing out loud. Tell me what you think.
I still remember the first time I ever told Crystal that I was in love with her. It was over the phone, and I was actually sitting outside of Dunkin' Donuts in like the middle of the night. I know, random. And then a few months later, her and her mom came and visited me, and it was incredible. The girlfriend I had then didn't approve of this, but I had to be honest with her that I was in love with somebody else. And as much as I wanted to try and work out the relationship I was in, I just knew it wasn't going to happen. Things were falling apart.
So this cyclic pattern that she has of using up a relationship until it's not useful anymore and then directly moving on to the next one. Something that I don't know, and I would be really interested in your take. I don't know if Amberlynn legitimately loves these people. She has described herself as somebody who falls in love really quickly and really easily, yet she also describes herself as somebody who doesn't trust anyone. I don't know if you can have deep love, true love, without trust or respect, for that matter. And it does make me wonder, it's possible that she's convinced herself that that's what love feels like because they're doing something for her and they're looking after her in a way. But whether or not that is love as we know it, I think there might be a disconnect there, because I don't know that you could love as intensely as what Amberlynn describes and be in such long-term relationships and then just be so willing to move on to the next one. I could see a world where Amberlynn's childhood was so tumultuous that she wasn't able to rely on anyone or count on anyone, and so perhaps she keeps that part of herself at a distance from the person that she loves, so they're never fully getting all of her, which means that she can never fully get hurt in a way, which might make it easier for her to move on. We'll never know. We don't know. We're not in her head. We don't know what she feels, but this is just my experience with love personally, but I'd be interested to know what your experience is.
Things were falling together so perfectly with Crystal that I couldn't ignore it.
And haven't we heard that before? It's always the perfect love, isn't it? Every time. Always at the beginning. Until it's not. And we do have a common denominator here across all of them. Oh, I cannot wait to get into all of them.
One night, me and the current girlfriend got in a huge argument, and I just couldn't deal. I finally just said, I'm done. I gave Crystal a call. Next morning, I was actually getting on a plane to be with her. Her parents paid, and I appreciate everything her parents have done for me. They're like parents I never had in a way.
So she is saying essentially that she's been having an emotional affair for an undisclosed amount of time. We know that Casey was aware that she met Crystal while they were still together, but how could you possibly commit to one person while you're having an emotional affair with another? And she's done this multiple times with multiple girlfriends. And then at the end to say they're like the parents I never had. You know, a big part of me thinks with Amberlynn that a vast majority of her lies, not all, don't think all, just a vast majority of them are actually telling herself what she wishes were true, or what she wants to feel, or the way that she wants it to be. And I think that might be why she doesn't see them as lies, because I think there might even be an element of convincing herself. And to say that these are the parents that she's never had, well, they're not, though, because we know that she eventually leaves Crystal and, you know, gets kicked out of the house and moves on to Destiny. So we know they're not, but she's telling herself, or at least she wants to spin the narrative that they are. And it's just not a healthy way to move through life. Not that I necessarily would have expected an early 20-something to have put this together yet. Maybe not, particularly given the arrested development that Amber has, but it's not healthy. You have to deal in facts.
Yes, we have ups and downs, but doesn't anybody? I mean, that's part of life, to be able to have ups and downs, but still know the true meaning of life, and that people are so kind if you really give them a chance, and I just appreciate them so much. Since I've been here, I've finally been urged to get healthy. I've been losing weight, and I've been doing it because of them. If it wasn't for them, I'd weigh way more than 420 pounds, and I can tell you that right now. They have helped me in ways that I can't even express, and I appreciate them so much. And I love you, Crystal. I know you're watching this, and I just want you to know that I love you so much. And you really do mean the world to me. So this is where I'm at now. I'm living with Crystal and her parents, and I'm really happy.
I left the end of this in. She describes this amazing environment she's in. She's feeling loved, she's feeling supported, and then she says, I'm really happy. I've seen these words from her before with pretty much exactly the same facial expression. And this is why I think it's that she wants to convince herself that that's the state of things, because she's clearly not happy. I don't know if at this point Amberlynn knows what it is to be truly happy. I think her definition of happy might be a little inaccurate about what happiness actually is, which, by the way, is a fallacy to seek. Happiness is an extreme of a range of emotions and not to be sought at all times. You cannot be happy all the time. That's not how brains work. In order to have happiness, there has to be sadness. It's just the balance of things. But this face in no way says that she's happy.
I kind of just skimmed over like the gruesome parts. I didn't want to get into detail like my life too much. I kind of just wanted to give you guys a little idea of where I come from. I feel better for kind of getting this off my chest, because it is good to know who is behind the video. And through it all, I'm still me. And even though my parents are never going to change, I'm 22 and they're still the way they were from day one.
So I found this interesting because I didn't know Mama Lynn's timeline. I know obviously they've reconnected at this point and she is reportedly clean and sober, which is awesome for her. And I hope she finds a way to be able to maintain that. But at, she said 22, she hasn't had her birthday yet. It's like in the next month. So the year of her 23rd birthday, Mama Lynn is still suffering with substance use. That is a fairly lengthy struggle then that Mama Lynn has gone through.
Knowing that I can be stronger than to be like them makes me feel like I'm gonna be alright. I really am.
Oh boy, and that's how she ended that. Spoiler alert, my nuggets. She's not okay. And she hasn't been stronger than them. It's just her substance of choice is food and nothing more. She is just as under the grips of it as what any other substance user is. So, final thoughts, my goodness. There's a lot. It's a lot, isn't it? Can you believe that the cycles started this early and that we're really not seeing any development or even any finesse in them? They're just all exactly the same as they have been for at least 12 years, and that's what we've got documented. They were probably there long before that too. But yeah, I'm really keen to get into this series with Amberlynn moving forward. I will be moving through 2013, and she did in 6 weeks 129 videos on YouTube. But for knowing that she tones that down significantly at some point, I don't know if I'd be able to face that, because I am watching over 13 hours of 2013 Amberlynn. I need to be able to preserve some of my brain cells for this activity. But it's a lot. But if you're still here listening to this, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and everything you do. But that's all the clucks I have left to give today. Stay golden, my little nuggets, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey! I'm gonna go watch another video. Let's go!